Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. As always, on the fourth Wednesday of the month, I'm joined by Mark LaBarr, conservation biologist for Audubon, Vermont. And today we're going to travel with him down south, where he spent some time with biologists from South Carolina. Nice to see you again.
Always great to be here.
Now, you managed to get to some pretty interesting places.
I am fortunate that way, yes. Part of my job allows me to travel to different places, and this time I was able to go down to South Carolina. Audubon, the National Audubon Society, has state programs across the country, Vermont being one of them. And one of the other programs is Audubon, South Carolina. And they run a bird banding station down there. So we do some banding here, so I wanted to go down and see what their situation was like. We were on a place called Sullivan's Island, which is just north of Charleston, so it's right on the coast. And I was down there in October when a lot of the migrants were pushing through and heading down south. So it was I had to pass up on some of the Vermont colors here, but I got to see a different place and some different birds.
Remind our viewers why you band birds.
So bird banding is done, it's a little metal ring that fits on the bird's leg. It has a number on it, and that number is unique, and it allows us to follow birds and track birds. Here's a shot of the banding station there down on Sullivan's Island. And we put these bands on, take a number of different measurements. That data is all recorded.
And you weigh the birds too.
We weigh the birds, we measure their wings, and then if that bird is ever recovered or caught again, the band can be read and we can figure out where that bird was from. All the data goes to the U.S. Bird Banding Lab, which has holds all the database. So if you ever find a bird with the band, you can go online and you can see who banded it, where it was banded, how old it was, what species it was, things of that nature. And it just provides a lot of ornithological data for us.
Now, have you ever caught the same bird twice?
At the Audubon Center, we do. We do catch a lot of birds that come through and breed there year after year. So we often catch a lot of what we call recaptures. In a banding station like this, where we're doing picking up the migrants that are moving through, you don't necessarily. Sometimes birds will stick around for a couple of days, and you might catch them during that time. But since they're pushing through, oftentimes you only catch them that one time when you're out there.
Now, you were down south right around the time that Hurricane Matthew went through.
It was, and in fact, I thought I was potentially not even going to be going because it came right into the South Carolina coast there. And this is what it looked like at the end of the day when we were leaving the banding station. Excuse me, the whole area down there was flooded, so they had to modify where they put up their mist nets, the nets that we use to catch the birds. But amazingly, they did not receive, this part of just north of Charleston, did not receive a lot of damage. So other than having to put on waders every day in order to get out to the banding station, the habitat was pretty intact.
So what did you catch?
So it's always fun, banding. I've been doing it for years, and especially at a station like this. When we're banding here in Huntington, we often catch the same stuff. It's things year after year. But when you're at a migratory station, you can catch a whole bunch of different stuff. So one of the birds we caught was a northern parula.
Oh, that's pretty.
So this is a bird that we have at the Nature Center every once in a while in Audubon, down in Huntington. We did. I did catch one this past year at Audubon, but that's a nice little tiny bird. You can see how small it is compared to the hand. Another small bird that we have is the ruby-crowned kinglet. And this is a great little bird. You can see that crest there just poking out. This is a male, and he'll flare that up during the breeding season. But again, we use all these clues when we're banding to try to age and figure out what sex they are. So that little red patch is a great hint of that. We caught a lot of small birds. This is a blue-gray gnatcatcher. Now, this is a bird that we do have here in Vermont, in the southwest. They like river systems, but it's a bird that I don't see all that often. So I've banded them before, but I've never really banded a lot of them. So it was great to, again, see some of these birds move through these habitats. This next bird, which is a white-eyed vireo, that's a southern species. So it's a bird that, in fact, I may have even talked about it on an earlier Across the Fence. There was one that poked into Vermont that created a
bit of a stir.
A bit of a stir in the birding community, because it's a good bird for Vermont. You get down a little further south and you see a lot of them. When I banded in Mississippi, we had one day as these birds came across the Gulf of Mexico where I caught more than 250 white-eyed vireo. It was just crazy. So this was a good bird to see again because, again, I don't see it all that often up here. A thrasher. So this is a bird that is not common here in Vermont anymore. Used to be more common. It's a shrubland species. So it was great to get one of these birds in the hand. It's, obviously a little bit bigger. It's a relative of the mockingbirds and the catbirds. It's a mimic. So it was, fun to see that. And then a bird we've talked about before. This is in kind of a drab plumage, but this is our butterbutt, or our yellow-rumped warbler.
Right, and you can see it next to those yellow flowers.
Yeah, I kind of thought that was kind of a cool shot with the flowers in the background, but you can see that yellow rump, and you see those white patches on the tail feathers?
Yeah.
So sometimes we can actually age a bird or sex a bird by the size of those patches and the pointiness of the tail. So how they're in the fall molting and what molt patterns they might be using. So there's all different techniques we use to figure out how old the birds are.
Anything special that you caught?
Well, it was funny because the night before I got there, I met with all the banders. I flew in and I had heard that they had caught this one bird, the yellow-breasted chat. And I said, well, we're going to catch one tomorrow. And the woman that ran the banding station was kind of like, don't get your hopes up. Don't
be crazy.
That was a good bird. And
what makes it a good bird?
Well, I had never banded it before. I'd seen it on occasion. It's not a bird that we have here in Vermont every once in a while, but I'd never held it in my hand. So it was a lifer for me. And first day, we open up the nets. And the first net I come across, and there's the chat in the net. So I got to add that to my list of birds that I've banded as a master bird bander.
So where did you stay while you were there?
So this is what made it kind of a sweet deal. They had an arrangement with the folks on another island just to the north of that called Deweese Island. So every day I stayed out there and this is the dock, I had to take a boat from the dock over to Sullivan Island and then drive to the banding station. So my days started with a boat ride. This is an island community that has permanent residents, but it also has rental units out there that people use. So they had an opening in one of the units, and I was able to be accommodated with that. They gave me a golf cart to cruise around on the island.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it was pretty sweet.
Must have been some good birds there.
And it was. We talk about a lot of these small birds that are coming through and migrating through, but Deweese Island had one wetland area that you would drive by in your golf cart and could pull over, and there were a host of different species. A lot of them are long-legged species, so a lot of great blue herons. And I had just purchased a new camera, so, these big guys are easy to take pictures of, and this guy was just sitting on a stump as I was driving along. Snowy egrets were there, so a bird that if you could see those feet, they would be yellow. that tells you it's a snowy egret, again, right along the driving paths, the sand paths that you would use to get out. Ibis were there. These are kind of cool wading birds with a big long bill that they use to probe into the muck in order to get shellfish and things like that. And then probably one of the better birds was the roseate spoonbill. And you can see why they get their name. They are, have that pinkish color. But they use that big bill there to sweep back and forth in the water and to be able to collect their food that way. So these were birds that, again, as you'd get off the boat at the end of the day,
they're just standing there,
and most of them are just standing there for you to see. So it was just a great kind of coastal experience all around.
Now, you don't think of bird banding as a dangerous endeavor, but there were some dangers.
Yeah, so it was interesting because, and this had happened to me once before when I was down doing some banding in Mississippi. And, you got to watch out. You're down south. In Vermont, we don't have to worry about it. But you have to watch out for things like alligators.
Yeah.
And I love this sign because it's like, the dock is closed when the alligator is there.
Yeah.
Now, one would hope that you wouldn't need a sign.
Right. You see an alligator, you wouldn't go near it.
Right. They do some fishing off these docks, and so it does bring the gators in. But this is on Deweese Island where, in these wetlands as you're driving by and even on the docks.
Oh, my gosh.
The gators would haul themselves up and, nothing to be overly concerned about. They're out there swimming along and they're not like chasing you down in the golf cart as you're cruising along or anything.
Yet.
But they add a nice attraction. When I was in Mississippi, though, we were on a remote island banding, and the banding lanes, the lanes that we would walk to get to the different nets, were often out in the open. So there were many times you'd be walking along, and right there in the middle of the trail, sunning itself, would be a gator, or which I wasn't too concerned about. They moved away pretty quick, but we would also see water moccasins. Just
big snakes.
Yeah, just species that we don't, when we're banding up here, we don't have to worry about. What we have to worry about, unfortunately, up here is ticks.
Right.
And as we know, they can be worse than a snake bite.
Right.
Depending.
Now, you said the yellow-breasted chat was a good bird for you, but anything special on Deweese Island?
Well, again, I had my new camera,
Yeah.
and I was down on the beach, and I'm taking pictures of different things, trying to get used to the camera, and all of a sudden I notice out on the beach on the sand flats is a lone piping plover. And it's just out there walking around, and so I'm taking pictures of it, and I've done plover work down in the Bahamas before. And, it was great. It was the only one out there. But it wasn't until I got back and looked at the pictures. And you can't quite tell. You'd have to look really close. But this bird is actually banded. And so I was able to call folks up. And it turned out that this piping plover had been banded as a chick in 2016 on Little Manitou Island up in Michigan.
Really?
Yeah, at Sleeping Bear Dunes. There's a national park up there. So I was able to communicate with the folks that had banded it, and they were like, wow, great. They put bands on it, but they hadn't seen it
right
after it had banded, and so they were psyched that it had made its way down here.
And obviously healthy and happy?
Moving around and working, and that bird's kind of a lead-in to a future across the fence, as I did make it down to the Bahamas again this year. And I'll talk about some of the work. I've talked about that in the past.
Right.
But again, it's another way that banding tells us migration patterns, how birds move, especially with a bird like the piping plover, which is a bird that is a big priority bird, and there's a lot of work been done on it. So it just gives us a lot of information.
Quickly, we've had some crazy weather lately. We had that warm up and then all the snow.
We did.
Red-winged blackbirds are back.
Yes.
Any concerns?
So no. I mean, you've got these migrants that are moving around, and you've got warm weather. These birds will come in and they can fly. So the big storm that hit, if it didn't suit their liking, they head a couple 100 miles down south and they'll be fine. But people did notice, especially things like blackbirds. Here, there was one account south of Snake Mountain, which it was 2 weeks earlier than any other blackbird had been seen.
Right.
So, just one of those things that everybody's kind of, noticing. And then, of course, Ma Nature comes in and
there you go.
And hits us with, normal March weather. So.
All right. Well, thanks, Mark. If you have a bird-related question, you can contact Mark. You can write to him at Audubon, Vermont, 255 Sherman Hollow Road in Huntington. The zip code is 05462. You can also email your questions to Mark. That address is mlabarr@audubon.org. Thanks again for joining us.
More than welcome.
That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.